Okay, and we are now live streaming on Facebook. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. We're delighted to have you here. My name is Phil Brown.
And my name is Stephen Herder. Phil and I do this every month or so, and it's always a lot of fun, but sometimes it's actually a little bit more fun than usual. And tonight's one of those nights. Hi, Penny.
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
We are pretty thrilled to see you again and to have this opportunity. Thanks so much for agreeing to come in and be our guest for a little interview, I guess. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I was thinking the last time was 2017 when I was on a course with you with iTDi.
Wow.
So,
time flies.
Indeed.
So we have some questions prepared, and we want to kind of get right into it as people are coming into the room on Facebook Live. We want to welcome everybody. Feel free to drop comments or questions, and Phil's going to be fielding everything in the background. Phil, anything else before I get going?
Yes, if you're seeing us on Facebook Live, then obviously please feel free to say where you're watching from, say hi, put your questions in as Steve has said, and any other comments. We will also respond to those, if not right away, then in due course. And of course, feel free to share the live stream on your Facebook page or any other groups that you want to reach other teachers and colleagues from too.
Cool.
I'm going to drop into the background and give center stage to both of you.
Yep.
So,
thank you.
Thank you.
So Penny, let's get going just with the real basics. I know that most people in the audience know of you or have followed some of your work, but this is kind of focusing on your role maybe before you became famous and when you were a teacher. What was your teaching experience?
Well, like a lot of people in the profession, I sort of fell into it almost by accident. I always wanted to be a teacher. I never intended to be an English teacher, but I got a teaching diploma, and then I came out to live in Israel, and nobody wanted me as a teacher, a class teacher. What they would need was an English teacher. So I started learning to teach English and learned, as they say, by the seat of my pants, just being thrown in there at the deep end and learning like a lot of us do as we go, by experience and reflection. And I found out I was good at it. So I just kept on in there.
What was the context? Were you in high school teaching?
I was, no, I started off in elementary, and actually to the end of my career, I prefer teaching elementary. I think it's more fun, and you really see how the students progress, and it really stretches you. So I loved doing that. Wasn't very good at the beginning, but I got better as I went on. And what really interested me was what works, what doesn't work in the classroom. And if people know my work, then you probably know the books which are about practical activities in the classroom, right? I didn't get into research until much later. Mainly what I wrote and published were ideas for activities or teaching strategies, which I found worked from the point of view of getting kids to learn well or getting to be motivated. And some of my articles fell into the hands of Cambridge University Press, and they published them as books, so that was nice. But I didn't actually do any academic work at that stage. I was too busy teaching a full teaching schedule, which takes up a lot of time, plus 4 children.
Yep.
No way I could read the research at that point. And I didn't get on to reading the background literature until quite a lot later, when the children were growing up, and I went into teacher training, and I had a little bit more time. And recently, since I've been retired, then I've been able to look at the research, which is where this course came from, if that's
Yeah.
your next question, which it is.
Well, we're going in that direction. I wondered, I guess selfishly, I'm wondering this, but do you remember how long it took you to start publishing some of your ideas? Like you said, you were focusing on what worked or didn't work. I remember it took me a long time in Japan before I went to Jolt meetings, or I think I wrestled with imposter syndrome and all kinds of other things, but maybe I was actually teaching 15 years before I dared tell anybody what was going on in my classrooms. How about you?
No, me it went a lot quicker, partly because I was teaching on a kibbutz, and the kibbutz organization had its own teachers forum, it had its own a newsletter, which they encouraged me to write for, and I started writing for that, and then for local magazines, and then international ones. And then, as I say, one of my articles happened by serendipity to fall into the hands of Cambridge University Press. So my first book was actually published in 1981, which was 10 years after I started teaching.
Wow.
So I went a bit faster than you.
Yeah, sure did.
I was lucky because of the situation I was teaching in. I had a lot of support and encouragement.
So you just said earlier that you didn't, with raising 4 kids, being a full-time teacher, that you didn't really access ELT research or use it. How did that transition happen? Was it just basically once you had more time, or did you know that was all going on in the background?
When I first started teaching, this was sort of, we're talking about 1969, 1970. Okay. There was relatively very little research on English language teaching, and compared to today, a fraction of what's coming out today. So firstly, there wasn't that much out there, and you had to look for it. And later on, more and more started being published, and I got more and more interested in it, together with the fact that I had more time. And the fact that I was writing books and wanting to make sure that what I was writing was not only stuff that worked for me, but also had some kind of theoretical research underpinning that made sense to me and to readers, and to enrich my own practice. And it's all part of, I suppose, ongoing professional development, that you learn first from your own experience, and then you progress to learning from other people's experience, experiments, research, and writing and theorizing, and progress through that. So it was a sort of natural transition from teaching myself, exploring my own teaching, writing, and reading.
Yeah, nice. And certainly the advent of the internet, made that available to everyone around the world. I mean, if you were teaching in 69, 70, you were, that's when encyclopedias were the source that people went to.
Right.
So,
right.
Wow.
Or paper journals.
Yes, exactly. It's often said that there's this gap between research and practice. It might be a gap that some people identify themselves as researchers in the university context, and teachers more so in the high school, elementary school, and that teachers don't implement insights from their research. What's your take on this?
The fact that there is a gap, yes, definitely there is a gap. Teachers don't, on the whole, and I'm sort of a bit cautious about this, but as a generalization, teachers on the whole don't implement much of the research, mainly because they don't have time to read it. I mean, like me, I was saying of myself, most teachers are in the same situation I was in, that young families plus full teaching schedule, there's no way you can access and read the research. Particularly as today, the sheer amount of stuff that's coming out every day is just mind-boggling, and there's no way you can keep up with it. So that's one reason. And another reason is that it remains true today, I think, that the main source of teacher expertise has to be classroom experience plus reflection on that experience, backed up, of course, by discussing with colleagues and feedback from students and so on. But it's mainly experience. If you ask any teacher how they became an expert teacher, 90% of them will say through my own experience, learning from my own classes. But having said that, there comes a point where there's just so much you can learn from your own experience. You reach a sort of ceiling, and therefore you need to go outside that and read and talk to experts and methodologists and get something from the research. So the research, I would say, is a secondary source of teacher knowledge, but a very significant and ultimately important one that enables you to move beyond what you can learn from your own experience.
Yeah, I mean, I promised not to embarrass you earlier, but I'm going to try again.
Go ahead.
when I was doing my master's and reading Scott Thornbury's book on grammar, and I literally remember getting to the last page. It was one of the first books I read cover to cover, and going, okay, I want to meet you someday. And that was like 2 or 3 years before I sent him an email and said, do you want to come to Japan? You know, and then I had a similar thing when I started reading some of your work, or in my influences like Dick Allwright and you know, Dornier's stuff on the classroom, and all of these like more practical. That's why, you know, that's why I like you so much, is that you're practical and you're focused on the students and what helps them to learn. Do you remember any of the people that my question, I guess, is more, were you influenced by people's ideas or just by ideas in general? Do you remember?
Difficult question. I think people. Yes. No. For example, I mean, Krashen's input hypothesis, for example, or Henry Widdowson and his introduction of the communicative approach in the late 1970s. So very often the ideas are inseparable from
the people,
particular people who introduced them. So both, I suppose, and I got into reading the research through reading theories, practical theories, if you like Widdowson's or Krashen's or Schmidt's ideas on noticing these sorts of things, which eventually led me into looking at the primary research that underlay these kinds of ideas, and then finding out that, whoops, there's some interesting stuff out there. You know, the stuff which I can actually use in my teaching. I'll give you an example. I read one of the earliest bits of research I remember reading is the research on retrieval rather than just study as encouraging students to learn words and learn vocabulary. If you just study vocabulary and repeat it or look at it again and again, that helps. But it helps more. And this is what the research found out, that if students are challenged to try and remember something on their own, they learn it better than if they're just shown it again. Right? And there's quite a lot of very, very interesting research on that. And that was one of the things which changed my practice, because what I used to be doing was I used to teach a set of words, and then the next lesson I'd come in and say, okay, guys, let me remind you of the words.
Yes.
And what I should have done is said, see how many you can remember on your own, and what you don't, I'll help you with. And they'd have learned better. So that's an example of where I saw that the research could improve my own practice. And I went on from there to look for more stuff. Yeah.
And when you tell me that story, it just reminded me of my first publication was on dictogloss, and with 2 other teachers, and I did it in my high school, and my friend did it in his language school, and another woman did it in her public junior high school. We all did the same one and wrote a chapter on our experience, but that was a lot about that retrieval process as well. And how exciting that is. Hey, it's so exciting when you see it in action.
Wow. Right. Absolutely.
So the last on this section of what I want to talk with you about, the last question is about your understanding of the concept of CPD, that kind of continual professional development. What's your, I guess, advice or experience on how to best implement that continuing professional development?
I suppose that links up with what I already said, Steve, about my own development. That the primary source of development is, of course, continuing experience. And even today, I mean, I find I'm learning things from doing an interview like this, or doing a course like the one I'm planning for iTDi.
Yeah.
So learning particularly learning from mistakes you make.
Yeah.
and someone points out to you, or you find out yourself making a mistake, and it enables you to move on, or something on the contrary, something which worked really well, and you build on it.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is networking. That's really one of the main reasons I go to conferences, is to meet people and exchange ideas. And one of the things which I hope will happen also on the iTDi course, that have a chance to exchange ideas with other professionals and develop myself and help them to develop themselves at the same time.
Yeah.
And finally, the reading of the theoretical literature, the reading of the research, even and I'll be talking about this in the course as well, even research which is negative. In other words, something which people generally believe, and there's no research to support it, or there's even research which contradicts it. So all sorts of interesting things like that, and that is the next stage in development, is to read and learn from, as much as you can, from the research and theoretical literature.
Yeah. So you've mentioned now more than me, you've mentioned the course. So we're going to move into that now.
Okay.
That you've done 2 courses for us in the past, and I tallied up, it was like 125 teachers were signed up on those 2 courses. And you know, thank you so much for the effort you put into interacting with that many people in the forums and stuff. But this time we're iTDi, for anybody in the audience who doesn't know, the main purpose of tonight's special visit by Penny is to tell you all that you have a phenomenal chance to spend 6 weeks, I guess, together with Penny and some like-minded teachers from around the world in another one of these iTDi courses. And it's called Research and Practice, A Teacher's Perspective. That's the name of the course. You can find out about it on our website. We'll have links to it in the Facebook Live that you can access as well. And I wanted to start with just simply, where did the idea for this course come from, Penny?
As I say, I got onto reading the research, as I mentioned in answer to an earlier question, quite late in my career. And I just got very, very interested in the different kinds of research which I read, and their connection or lack of connection with classroom practice. In other words, what you find is that some research, like the research on the retrieval of vocabulary and practice, which I mentioned earlier, is really, really helpful and relevant. Some of it is sort of Mickey Mouse stuff, which doesn't seem to have any connection at all. And some has a sort of ambiguous, if you like, connection, which you need to apply very carefully and selectively. And it's just fascinating to read the different studies and think about, does this work? Doesn't this work? Is this relevant? Is this not relevant? Is it interesting, but actually not very practical? All sorts of questions like this. And I really got fascinated by the whole issue of research on language acquisition or teaching or pedagogical issues, and the relationship between that research and classroom practice.
Yep.
And, I'm a teacher. So anything which interests me and I get fascinated by, and I think I've discovered something, my immediate instinct is to want to share it with other people.
Yeah.
And that's where this course came from. It's a fascinating topic. I think it's an important topic for the profession.
Yes.
And I want to share it. So
Do you
that's where it
think
came.
teachers need to have 10 years experience or 15 years experience to join this course?
No, not at
No,
all.
hey?
I think
Yeah. The
even
sooner the
someone
better, I think.
who's thinking about being a teacher, I think the course could be interesting
Yep.
for anybody
Yep.
who's
Yeah, and I think, yeah, the sooner you get thinking about things as well as while you're working out your own craft as a teacher, but thinking about other ideas and the chance to have a senpai in Japanese, a junior, a senior, to work with other teachers and share ideas. So you're well known for doing lectures and plenary addresses at conferences around the world and teacher training sessions. What are the advantages of doing this in an actual online course versus just going out and doing a speech about it?
I'm actually giving a talk at iTFL on a similar topic to this, but that's just just a one-off half-hour lecture. And the advantage of iTFL is that, of course, you're there physically with the audience in the same room, which is nice. But on the other hand, a 6-hour course online with iTDi means that I have the opportunity to exchange ideas and pool and share. And it's much, much more enriching, and you can get into a deeper and richer learning with this kind of setup. So that's why I'm really grateful that you accepted my suggestion to take this topic and do a course on it.
So I guess that's we had a question for you about the goals for this course. I'm sure that's one of the main goals, is to be able to share and exchange ideas, huh?
To share and exchange ideas. I think to share, just to enrich teachers' awareness of the kinds of research studies which are out there, which are interesting, particularly ones from the 21st century, from the last 20 years, but also earlier ones. So that's one thing, to familiarize yourself with the kinds of things that are being researched, but also critical thinking about them. What different kinds of research are there? How relevant are these different types to classroom practice? And how we can use some criteria for using them or rejecting them or adapting them to our own practice.
Yeah, that critical thinking.
The participants' practice will inevitably be different from mine, and their teaching styles will be different from mine. And I hope that, as I said before, that we'll be able to help each other, enrich each other with different experiences and contexts.
Yeah. Have you? We mentioned earlier, maybe before this even started, with the internet, it's like an avalanche of materials and articles and research. How will you actually pick research articles for this course? How do you keep your finger on the pulse of what's out there?
Yeah,
Tough,
the
isn't
course,
it?
the iTDi course I recently attended by Kevin, he used the fire hose metaphor. Yeah, try drinking from a fire hose. You've got this enormous stream of water coming out. How do you drink from it?
Yeah,
which I think is a lovely metaphor, and it's exactly that. There's just far too much out there for any human being to be able to read it all or assess it all. So this will lead to the fact that what I'm going to share on the course is only a small proportion of what's out there, and it's naturally selective according to what I've managed to get my hands on and what I've selected to use. How do I access? I regularly look through my favorite journals and sort of pick up articles and abstracts which I think are interesting and look at them. Quite a lot I just see the title and discard them, but which leaves a lot to read. I also recently started looking at an RSS feed.
Yes.
Which is an internet source of all sorts of looking at people's Twitter feeds or blogs or publishers' websites, and getting information from there about what's coming out. So those are the two main sources. And then the selection is inevitably subjective,
Yep.
according to what I think is useful and helpful, I hope, to the teachers who will attend the course.
I wonder, is that an easy process, or is it a difficult process to narrow it down?
It's very, very time consuming. There's no
Yeah.
way I could have done this course before I retired.
Yeah. So thank you.
There's an enormous number of hours. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Phil, are you there in the background?
Yes, I'm here.
Good man. I wonder, we're wrapping up on my question. I'm going to ask Penny if there's anything that you wanted to say beyond what I've asked you so far, but I also thought, Phil, you might want to share the course page just to show people where we're at and what the Penny's course page looks like. You have that stuff ready?
Yeah, I'll pull that up in just a second. There's also a couple of questions coming from the audience. I put into the Zoom chat. Perhaps you'd like to relay them to Penny just while I pull up the page.
In the Zoom chat. Okay.
Thank you very much. Questions from Julian and from Julian Whitney, and also Caitlin Liver and Ruben.
Okay there, Penny. How do you juggle all of your different tasks? Do you do you have set times for doing things, or how do you approach?
That is an excellent question. I'm not sure I know the answer. Certainly, I have a sort of day's time schedule, which I know that I'm a morning person, so I get up in the morning and do my little walk, and then shower, coffee, and get down to work. And so the first thing I do is the reading, the updating in the morning, because that's what I need to be fresh for, and then get on to my own writing and correspondence later. But it's a morning thing, yes, and every day I have sort of 3-4 hours in the morning when I'm doing intensive professional work like that. Again, Steve, as I said before, I couldn't have done this when I was in full-time teaching. So that's how I do it, and then. And then there are days when, of course, I can't do that because children, grandchildren
but it sounds,
around. So
it sounds like
when we're alone, when I've got time alone in the home, then yes, I have a set schedule.
Ruben, who's an old friend of ours who's in Argentina, is asking, how do we continue learning once we are retired? Because I think he's retired recently.
How do you not? I think
maybe easier.
I have to. It's a sort of inner urge. I think it's part of being a teacher. I think, and the main source is, thank goodness for the internet and for the resources I have. And I kept up contact with my college where I used to teach, and they kindly enabled me to use all their online library facilities, so I can get hold of pretty well any article I need or book that I need through them. So I use that, and as I say, most days when I'm not busy with family and other stuff, I spend time reading and catching up, just because it interests me, because I love it and I'm interested in it.
We've got where is Caitlin?
She's in Brazil.
Brazil. Yeah. So Caitlin's done a course with us in iTDi, and she's talking about 21st century skills. Are you familiar with that kind of set of 21st century skills?
Yeah, I see her question. She says, well, aren't the 21st century skills just a new label to what was considered important skills in the past?
Yeah.
Yes, I think she's absolutely right.
Good.
like things 20th century skills like critical thinking. I think that's always been really important. Working in teams, that's always been important. The only thing which is new to some extent is some of the skills, the what's called digital literacies.
Yeah.
Okay, things like coping with search engines, coping with intertextual features of websites, and very recently coping with what's called prompt literacy, coping with GPT and how to use GPT. So that's another literacy which is coming in. So there are new things which are coming in which are new, but on the whole, I agree with Ketchin that most of what the people label as 20th century skills are things which have always been and always will be important.
Yeah, thanks, Penny. Phil, do you want to open up the website page or not?
I'm going to share that. And just one more question from Renata, who asks, Penny, what's your greatest motivation?
What's my greatest motivation? That's a really difficult question. And going back to being a teacher, my greatest motivation as a teacher was seeing people learn. I think the exciting thing, the thing which really gives you that aha moment, is when you teach something and you realize that the people you're teaching are actually learning it and understanding, and they're with you and they're getting there, and it's a wonderful feeling. So I'm a teacher. I love people to learn, and I like
that's
the main thing which occurs to me.
Phil, you're showing us all the hundreds of things you're working on your desktop right now.
Oh, sorry about that. That actually, she was supposed to share Chrome. I'll just go through again. Slight glitch.
And it was a big sand dune as well, which looked nice. And, it looks like a sand dune covered with too much work.
Yeah, how embarrassing. There you go.
It could have been so much more embarrassing. Okay. So there we go.
That's me 6 or 8 years ago, right, Stephen?
Your smile is the same. I love that picture down at the bottom. Is that the one down at the bottom, Phil? Is that one there with your leaning up on something? I thought that was just a great picture. Yeah.
So this is the upcoming course, which starts on May 7th.
Yep. And there's no actual textbook, with
no, but there will be articles. There will be articles to read.
Yeah.
So I will upload.
Yeah, that's great. Any more scrolling there, Phil, or not needed?
I'll just pull up a little bit. So yes, you're going to be looking at, Penny, what kinds of research are there, and thinking about what was more or less relevant to classroom practice. Earlier, you talked about that kind of research that we either implement in our classrooms, or we need to adapt, or we reject as well. And then you were addressing some of the other questions about, what kind of articles to look at and so forth. Would you like to share a little bit more about that?
Well, I think people can actually read through it and, follow up with questions on this chat if they would like to in the Facebook page. So we're gonna actually wrap up the interview. I meant to ask Penny, is there anything that you wanted to talk about with this course that I didn't ask you already?
Nothing I can think of, Steve. I think we've covered most important points.
Yeah. So what we normally do is invite people to come in and just chat with. They might have questions for me or Phil or something else that we can sort of field together. Phil, have you put the link in there?
Yes, I'm just doing it now. I'm just doing it across.
And it's just going to be, it's going to be just a few minutes in here of, saying hello to some people around the world. And we'll take it from there. Did, besides the, I know that there were some computer problems with that you experienced during Kevin's course, or some technical issues, but the process itself, was that a a big learning experience for you, Penny, or was it?
It was a learning experience, yes. I certainly got a lot out of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there were about 6 or 8 of you in that course. I don't remember.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a nice way
From
to.
all over the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Different places.
Yeah, cool. So I think we have about 7 teachers signed up for the course currently, and we're hoping that we'll get. We've still got, what is it, the 10th? We still got a little bit less than a month left, so we hope that we'll have others signed up and have an equally, engaging and collaborative experience with teachers that we can squeeze into this course. What do you got happening there, Phil?
Okay, so just to let everyone know in the audience, I posted actually under my personal name. There's a join Zoom meeting link and passcode if you'd like to join Steve, Penny, and myself in the room.
Yep.
We will then, you'll be able to come in. If you don't want to appear on screen, just leave your camera off. You can either use the chat as always, or you can ask any questions directly in the room as well. And everybody else, you're welcome to obviously put any other questions you have in the Facebook chat as well.
Okay. Just while people come in, I'm not sure, Penny, the last time we did a course together, I'm not sure I had all these plants in the background. They all arrived almost one day after another during the coronavirus, when I was sitting here alone for, almost 2 years. And I just kept going to the local supermarket that had a little plant section and buying things. They're all much smaller than they are now, but these are my new friends. And we got Andy. Hey, Andy. Andy Boone in Tokyo. We hope. He's not the only Andy we know in the world, but he's the Andy we like. There he is. Hi there.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, good. How you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Good, good.
So Penny, just earlier what you were saying, it was totally resonated with one of my favorite quotes from Bruce Lee, who says, research your own experience, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, and add what is essentially your own.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Andy, were you listening through most of that, or are you just coming in now?
I've been listening. Yeah.
Oh, good, 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 good.
Yeah, very interesting stuff.
Andy has a book that's just come out, hey, with Greg Hadley on critical thinking, which is kind of both. What percent of it is it? Half and half with theory and then practice.
The way the series works is that the theory is in chapter 1, and then chapter 2 is a collection of activities that teachers can use. Yep. So the meat of the book is the activities. So you get the theoretical and pedagogical takeaway value.
Yeah.
So, teachers can learn about critical thinking, the theory, take away the activities, adapt them, use them in the classroom. There's chapter 3 is advice about implementation and curriculum design, and chapter 4 is about the research of critical thinking.
Yeah. Oh, it's a really, really nice book, Penny. We've it's got a little bit of a Penny Ure-esque approach to it in looking at some of her books in the past, which are both, theory and a heavy focus on practice. Yeah, cool.
Andy, can you put up the title of it in the chat box?
I can do it, but I'll ask Phil to do that if that's possible, because I'm actually walking around with an iPad, so it's not
okay.
Yeah, Phil, could you do that? Is that all right?
Yeah, I will.
Cheers.
Pull it up.
What's that going to cost? What's that going to cost, Andy, for you to run this little 30-second commercial on critical thinking, the book? Yeah, that's a great book, Penny. It's great. Yeah, and you're getting nice positive response to it, Andy. You get to see any of that yet, or not really?
Not yet. It's hard to know. It's hard to know how well it's doing. I get friends posting pictures with the book, which is always nice to know that it's got into some great hands.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit too early to get actual feedback.
Right.
And sometimes it's a very lonely business. I'm sure Penny will, concur with this. It can be a very lonely business, writing, because you don't see the end results. Going to conferences, maybe you get teachers coming up and saying, oh, I've used this, and but it can be a very lonely business. You don't really know the fruits of your labor.
Yeah, it takes a while.
Yeah. But hopefully it will be getting into some good hands, and we'll see how it does.
Yes. I've got one more question from the audience on Facebook, Penny, who's just asking, what are your favorite journals, or what's the pick of like go-to places for you?
Favorite journals. For practical things, I used to like English Teaching Professional, which recently merged with Modern English Teacher. So that's one. Language Teaching, the Cambridge publication, Cambridge Journal, quarterly. ELT Journal, I like. System. And the RELT Journal from Singapore is great.
That's always good. Yeah.
Studies in second language. I could go on. Those are perhaps the main ones which I read regularly.
Right, that's a good, nice handful to get going with, definitely.
Yeah.
So, Phil, I don't want to, keep everybody around if we've got a nice punchy little interview here done and dusted, and rest of your day for you two and the end of my day. So do we want to just kind of invite people to at least go see the page on iTDi, take a look at Penny's course. We also have other courses coming up. We have a book about to be published, lots of things that people can look at. And certainly never hesitate to ask questions through our Facebook page, through this interview at the bottom. We'll have lots of questions and answers. And then we'll be starting this new course with Penny Ure on May 7th. Yes.
So the link is in the chat for the course, as well as it will be in the course in the Facebook Live description. You can also find it via our Facebook page, other social media, and so forth. Thank you very much again, Penny, for coming and joining us today. It's been a real pleasure. And thank you everyone in the audience for coming and joining us and adding your questions. If anyone's watching the recording, then of course feel free to post anything in the chat still, and we'll still respond to those in due course.
Thanks, Penny.
Bye.
Okay.
Right, thank you.
We'll be in touch. Bye-bye.